You're standing in the cleaning aisle of your local supermarket, casually scanning the rows of brightly colored bottles, each promising a fresh, clean scent for your home. Your hand reaches out and picks up a bottle of lemon-scented spray, and almost immediately, a thought crosses your mind. Would this bother my German Shepherd? It's a simple question, born from the kind of care and concern that responsible dog owners feel for their four-legged companions. You want what's best for your dog. And if there's something in your environment that could cause them discomfort, you want to know about it. Somewhere online, you've probably read that dogs hate citrus. Maybe you've stumbled across a forum post where someone swore that vinegar keeps their dog away from furniture. Perhaps a well-meaning friend or family member told you that German Shepherds have the most sensitive nose of any breed, so obviously certain smells must be unbearable to them. These kinds of claims circulate widely in the digital age, passed from person to person through social media posts, YouTube videos, and pet advice websites. They become part of the collective wisdom that dog owners share with one another, repeated so often that they start to feel like established facts. Here's the problem, though. Almost none of that is actually proven, and by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why the popular answer to "what smell do German Shepherds hate" isn't just incomplete in some cases. It's dangerous advice that could put your dog's health at risk. We're going to peel back the layers of myth and misinformation that surround this topic, examining what the actual scientific research has to say about canine olfaction, how German Shepherds specifically process smells, and why individual variation is so much more significant than most people realize. Because here's the thing nobody tells you up front. There is no scientific study that has ever set out to answer this exact question for German Shepherds. Not one. The scientific literature on canine olfaction is vast and growing, but nobody has ever designed a controlled experiment with the specific goal of determining which smells German Shepherds universally dislike. What we have instead is a patchwork of research on dog senses in general, a handful of small genetic and behavioral studies on German Shepherds specifically, and a mountain of owner stories on forums and social media. Some of it lines up, a lot of it contradicts itself. And when you start pulling the thread, you find out that the smell your German Shepherd hates might be completely different from the smell the German Shepherd down the street hates, even though they're the same breed. Even though they supposedly have the same legendary nose. So if you came here looking for a simple list you can spray around your house and expect your dog to avoid, stick around, because we're going to give you something more useful than that. We're going to walk through what actually happens when a German Shepherd encounters a strong smell, why their reactions are so wildly inconsistent from dog to dog, which smells come up again and again in owner reports. And this part matters a lot. Which of those smells are not just disliked, but genuinely dangerous to have around your dog at all? Before we dive into specific smells and their effects on German Shepherds, it's worth taking a moment to appreciate just how remarkable the canine olfactory system actually is. Dogs experience the world primarily through their noses in a way that humans, with our comparatively limited sense of smell, can barely comprehend. The difference in olfactory capability between humans and dogs is so vast that it's almost impossible to truly understand what the world smells like to a dog. To put this in perspective, consider the raw numbers. Humans have approximately 5 to 6 million olfactory receptors in our noses. These are specialized cells that detect odor molecules floating in the air. A dog, depending on the breed, has anywhere from 125 million to 300 million olfactory receptors. That's not a small difference. That's a difference of several orders of magnitude. The German Shepherd, as a breed, falls somewhere on the higher end of that spectrum, with estimates suggesting they possess around 225 million olfactory receptors. This means that a German Shepherd's nose is approximately 40 to 50 times more sensitive than a human's nose. But the difference doesn't stop at receptor count. The structure of a dog's nose is also optimized for olfaction in ways that human noses simply aren't. When a dog breathes in, the air splits into two separate streams, one heading to the lungs for respiration and another heading to the olfactory region of the nasal cavity where odor molecules are detected. This means that a dog can smell continuously, even while breathing, because their respiratory and olfactory air streams are separate. Additionally, Dogs have something called the vomeronasal organ, also known as Jacobson's organ, located in the roof of their mouth. This specialized organ detects pheromones and other chemical signals that play a crucial role in social communication, mating behavior, and other instinctual responses. It's another layer of olfactory processing that humans simply don't possess. The olfactory bulb in a dog's brain is also disproportionately large compared to humans. In fact, the part of a dog's brain dedicated to processing smells is about 40 times larger than the equivalent area in a human brain, even when you account for overall brain size. This isn't just about detecting smells, it's about processing them, interpreting them, and building a complex sensory picture of the world based primarily on chemical information. When you understand these biological differences, it becomes clear why smells that are barely noticeable to humans could be overwhelming to a dog. A lemon-scented spray that seems pleasant to us might be a blast of intense, potentially irritating chemical stimulation to a German Shepherd's nose. Similarly, the faint hint of vinegar we might barely register could be a sharp, penetrating odor to a dog. But here's the crucial point that often gets lost in these discussions. Detecting a smell strongly doesn't necessarily mean disliking it. Intensity and aversion are two entirely different experiences. There's a widely held belief that German Shepherds have one of the best noses in the entire dog world. It's part of why they're used so heavily in police work, search and rescue operations, and various detection roles. The image of a German Shepherd tracking a scent through a dense forest or locating a missing person under rubble is so powerful that it has become almost iconic. This perception of superior olfactory ability is deeply embedded in our cultural understanding of the breed. However, when researchers actually put that assumption to the test with controlled scientific experiments, the results were not what most people expected. This is a critical point that challenges the foundation of many popular beliefs about German Shepherds and smell. In a study published in the Journal of Comparative Psychology, researchers designed an odor discrimination task to test dogs from 3 distinct breeds: pugs, German Shepherds, and greyhounds. The assumption going in, based on breed reputation and widespread belief, would be that the German Shepherds should dominate this test. After all, they're the working dogs, the police dogs, the search and rescue dogs. Their noses are legendary, right? Instead, the pugs significantly outperformed the German Shepherds, both in how quickly they learned to discriminate between odors and in how well they maintained accuracy when the odor concentration was lowered. The pugs, a breed almost nobody associates with scent work, consistently demonstrated superior olfactory discrimination abilities compared to the German Shepherds in this controlled experimental setting. Let that sink in for a moment. Pugs, flat-faced, snorting, lapdog pugs, outperforming German Shepherds on an actual controlled odor test. This finding completely upends the common narrative about German Shepherds having some kind of uniquely superior nose. But this is where the story gets even more interesting. The study's results don't mean that German Shepherds have bad noses, or that they're somehow poor at scent detection. What it suggests is that their success in police work and detection tasks likely comes down to something different than biologically superior olfactory hardware. Generations of selective breeding for trainability, focus, intelligence, and a willingness to listen to and work alongside a human handler have made German Shepherds exceptional working dogs. They're good at scent work, not necessarily because they have the best noses, but because they're highly motivated to work, they're responsive to training, and they can maintain focus on a task for extended periods. This is a crucial distinction that changes how we should think about German Shepherds and smell. Their working ability is real and impressive, but it's not purely about having an extraordinary nose that makes certain smells unbearably intense. It's about a combination of factors that includes trainability, drive, and a strong partnership with human handlers. This is where the genetics come in, and this is honestly the most interesting part of the whole picture when it comes to understanding why German Shepherds respond differently to smells. The genetic research on canine olfaction has revealed a level of individual variation that explains almost all the contradictions we see in owner reports and anecdotal evidence. A study published in the journal Animal Genetics looked at 48 police service German Shepherds, 28 males and 20 females, and examined specific SNP genotypes, which are small genetic variations, in their olfactory receptor genes. What they found was that these genetic markers were linked to differences in olfactory ability. But it wasn't a simple case of some dogs have better smell than others across the board. The type of odor mattered significantly. Certain genetic profiles predicted strong performance detecting one odor and weaker performance detecting a completely different one. This means that the genetic variations that make a dog good at detecting certain types of chemical compounds don't necessarily make them good at detecting others. The genetic architecture of olfactory ability is complex and odor-specific. Translate that into plain terms. Two German Shepherds, side by side, from the same litter even, could have meaningfully different genetic wiring for how they process specific smells. One dog's nose might register a particular odor as intensely strong. The other dog's nose, due to a different genetic profile, might barely register it as anything worth reacting to. This single finding explains almost every contradiction we ran into earlier when examining owner anecdotes. Why did one German Shepherd flee the room from citrus, while another one begs for orange slices? Why did one German Shepherd get repelled by vinegar, while another one licked it straight off the floor? It's not that one owner is wrong and the other is right. It's that these are, at a biological level, different noses processing the same chemical compound in different ways. The implications of this genetic variation are profound. It means that there's no such thing as a universal German Shepherd response to any particular smell. The breed standard describes physical characteristics, temperament traits, and working abilities, but it doesn't predict olfactory preferences. Each dog's nose is unique, shaped by their specific genetic inheritance and their individual life experiences. This genetic variation extends beyond just the receptors themselves. There are also variations in how the brain processes olfactory information, how quickly signals are transmitted, and how the dog's emotional systems respond to different smells. All of these factors combine to produce the individual response patterns we see in real dogs. There's a separate but related point that matters just as much as the genetic variation when it comes to understanding German Shepherds and smell. Detecting a smell and disliking a smell are not the same thing. This distinction gets lost constantly in casual conversation about dogs, but it's absolutely critical to understanding the actual science of canine olfaction and behavior. A dog can have an extremely sensitive reaction to an odor, meaning they notice it instantly, at a concentration far below what a human could ever detect without that reaction being negative at all. Sensitivity is about detection threshold, or the minimum concentration of an odor that the dog can perceive. Aversion is about emotional response, about whether the dog experiences that smell as pleasant, neutral, or unpleasant. These are two completely separate systems, and just because a German Shepherd's nose picks something up strongly doesn't mean the dog experiences that smell as unpleasant. Researchers have actually measured raw detection sensitivity in German Shepherds directly in scientific studies. One study found a mean olfactory threshold of about 5,900 molecules per cubic centimeter of air for a compound called butyric acid, and that threshold was lower than what was found in fox terriers, meaning the German Shepherds in that study needed a smaller concentration to detect the smell. The researchers connected this lower threshold to a larger number of olfactory cells in the breed, suggesting that German Shepherds do have a biological advantage in terms of detection sensitivity for certain compounds. But notice that that study measured the detection threshold, not hatred, not aversion, just the ability to notice something is there. The German Shepherds could detect the smell at very low concentrations, but the study didn't test whether they liked it, disliked it, or felt neutral about it. That's a different question entirely, requiring different experimental methods. This distinction between detection and aversion explains why some German Shepherds can perform brilliantly in scent detection work while simultaneously showing no particular aversion to strong smells. Being able to detect a smell and being motivated to work for a reward when that smell is present doesn't require the dog to dislike the smell. In fact, many scent detection dogs are trained using positive reinforcement, where finding the target odor leads to play, treats, or other rewards. The smell itself becomes associated with something pleasant, not unpleasant. So even in the one area where German Shepherds do show a documented biological advantage picking up faint smells, that advantage tells you nothing about whether the smell bothers them once they've noticed it. It's entirely possible that a dog with an exceptionally sensitive nose experiences strong smells as more intense, but not necessarily more unpleasant than a dog with a less sensitive nose. Now let's bring in one more layer, because genetics alone doesn't explain everything about why dogs respond to smells the way they do. Experience matters just as much as biology, and the interaction between genetics and experience is what ultimately produces the individual response patterns we observe. Dogs form associations the same way people do, just through a different sensory channel. If a German Shepherd has a negative experience, a stressful vet visit, a scary event, an unpleasant medical procedure, and a particular smell happens to be present during that experience, the dog's brain can link that smell to the fear or discomfort of the moment. From that point forward, the smell itself can trigger a reaction that has nothing to do with the chemical properties of the odor and everything to do with what it now represents in the dog's mental world. This is actually a really elegant explanation for something that shows up constantly in owner anecdotes. One person described their German Shepherd mix developing a fear response specifically to the smell of a barbecue, not something you'd expect to be universally frightening to dogs, but clearly tied to something that happened in that dog's personal history. Perhaps the dog had a bad experience near a grill, or maybe the smell was associated with fireworks, or another loud, frightening event. Context creates meaning. A citrus-scented cleaner might be neutral to most dogs, but if it happens to be the same cleaner used at a stressful groomer's office, that individual dog might develop a genuine aversion to citrus that has nothing to do with citrus chemistry at all, and everything to do with what citrus now reminds them of. Similarly, a smell that's initially unpleasant might become neutral or even pleasant if it's consistently paired with positive experiences like treats, play, or affection. This learned association phenomenon is well documented in behavioral science, and it explains why dogs can develop preferences and aversions that seem completely arbitrary to outside observers. The smell of a particular cleaning product might be fine in the kitchen, but terrifying at the vet's office. The smell of a certain type of food might be eagerly anticipated at home, but avoided if it was associated with illness. The implications for the "what smell do German Shepherds hate" question are significant. Even if there were some smells that German Shepherds were biologically predisposed to dislike, individual learning history can override or modify those predispositions. A dog's life experiences shape their preferences and aversions in ways that can't be predicted based on breed alone. Let's start with the smell that everyone assumes is universal: citrus. If you've spent any time around dog owners, you've probably heard some version of "dogs hate lemons." It's repeated so often that it's basically treated as fact, passed from person to person without question. There is some real evidence behind this claim, which is why it's so persistent. A recent study on free-ranging dogs in India documented avoidance behavior around citrus. The researchers observed that free-roaming dogs tended to avoid areas where citrus fruits or citrus peels were present, suggesting some kind of aversive response. The leading theory among scientists is that certain compounds in citrus peels, specifically limonene and citral, can be irritating to a dog's nasal receptors. These compounds have a pungent quality that might be uncomfortable for sensitive canine noses. There's also a theory that goes back to evolutionary biology. Citrus notes show up in some plants that are genuinely harmful if eaten. An instinctive wariness toward that smell family might have been useful for a dog's ancestors long before there was anything called a German Shepherd. This evolutionary pressure could have shaped a general tendency to avoid citrus smells, making them more likely to be aversive than other types of odors. That all sounds reasonable, but here's where it gets interesting. When you look specifically for evidence about German Shepherds and citrus, there isn't any. No peer-reviewed study has ever tested German Shepherds against a citrus smell and measured whether they avoid it. Everything you've heard about German Shepherds and citrus is either borrowed from research on other dogs, or it's coming from an owner's forum post. And those forum posts are genuinely all over the place. Some owners describe their German Shepherd wrinkling its nose and walking straight out of the room the second an orange gets peeled. Other owners describe the exact opposite. One person online mentioned that their German Shepherd actually loves oranges, not just tolerating the smell, but will beg for a piece. So even within this one smell category, you're looking at individual dogs behaving in completely opposite ways. This contradiction is actually the most important thing to understand about this entire topic, because once you get why that happens, the rest of the information we're covering is going to make a lot more sense. The combination of genetic variation and individual learning history produces dramatically different responses, even among dogs of the same breed. Now, before we go further into citrus, there's a safety point that matters more than any behavioral detail. The citrus fruit itself, in small amounts, is generally not something you need to panic about if your dog gets a taste. However, concentrated citrus essential oil is a completely different story. That's not the dog might not like it territory. That's respiratory irritation and toxicity if ingested. So even if you're tempted to use a citrus spray as a way to keep your dog off the couch, using a strong essential oil version of that smell isn't a mild deterrent. It's a health risk. Keep that in the back of your mind, because it's going to come up again with almost every smell on this list. Let's move to the next one that gets mentioned constantly: vinegar. Vinegar has this reputation as a dog repellent that's been passed down through generations of pet owners. You'll see it recommended in gardening forums, home remedy sites, and all sorts of other places. Usually with the confident claim that the sharp acidic smell is overwhelming and unpleasant to dogs. The logic behind this claim makes a certain amount of intuitive sense. Vinegar has a strong, pungent odor that many humans find unpleasant. If it smells strong to us, it must be overwhelming to a dog with a much more sensitive nose, right? This line of thinking is plausible, which is why the recommendation has been so widely adopted. And for a lot of dogs, that might genuinely be true. The nose of a dog is far more sensitive than ours, and something that's just sharp to us could be intensely sharp to them. The acetic acid in vinegar can be irritating to sensitive nasal passages, and the volatility of the compound means it spreads through the air quickly, reaching a dog's nose at concentrations that might be uncomfortable. But once again, when you look for actual German Shepherd evidence, what you find is inconsistency, not confirmation. One owner reported using vinegar to try to keep their dog away from a specific area, and it worked effectively. The dog avoided the area where vinegar had been applied, seemingly finding the smell unpleasant enough to stay away. Another owner described something almost funny. Their German Shepherd walked right up to a puddle of vinegar on the floor and licked it. Not avoid it, licked it. The dog showed no sign of finding the vinegar unpleasant, and in fact, seemed to find it interesting enough to taste. Now, stop and think about what that means. If vinegar were a universal aversive smell for German Shepherds, something hardwired into the breed, the way people talk about it, you wouldn't expect one dog to lick it directly off the floor. That single anecdote alone should make you skeptical of any blanket statement that starts with, "German Shepherds hate vinegar." It's worth noting that there are some potential reasons why a dog might lick vinegar instead of avoiding it. Vinegar is sometimes used as a dietary supplement or flavoring in certain dog foods. So some dogs might associate the smell with food. Other dogs might simply be curious about the novel smell and want to investigate it more closely. Still others might find the sour taste appealing for reasons that aren't fully understood. The same safety note applies here too. Diluted vinegar is generally low risk for most dogs, assuming the dog doesn't ingest a large amount. Spraying it directly and undiluted at your dog, especially near their face, isn't a fair or appropriate way to train or repel them, and it's not something any credible trainer or veterinarian would recommend. The concentrated acidity of undiluted vinegar can be irritating to sensitive tissues, and the spray could get into your dog's eyes, nose, or mouth, causing discomfort or even minor injury. Now let's talk about alcohol, and specifically the kind you're most likely to have in your house: rubbing alcohol and alcohol-based hand sanitizer. This is a category of smell that has become especially relevant in recent years. This one became particularly important for a lot of households after 2020, when hand sanitizer usage exploded across the country. Hand sanitizer dispensers appeared everywhere in homes, offices, stores, restaurants, and public buildings. A German Shepherd who's constantly around a household using hand sanitizer is going to be exposed to that particular chemical smell far more often than dogs a few decades ago ever were. The general reporting on this is that the fumes from alcohol-based products can be irritating and even disorienting for a dog, which makes sense given how volatile those compounds are and how quickly a dog's nose picks up on and processes airborne particles. The sharp, chemical smell of rubbing alcohol or hand sanitizer is quite strong even to human noses, so it's reasonable to assume it would be even more potent to a dog. Once again. And by now you're probably noticing the pattern. There is no dedicated German Shepherd research on this. The evidence is general canine behavior extrapolated onto the breed, not something tested on German Shepherds specifically. What we have is the same kind of owner reports and anecdotal evidence that we've seen with other smells. And it matters here too that alcohol isn't just a maybe unpleasant smell. Rubbing alcohol is toxic if ingested, and the fumes themselves can genuinely irritate a sensitive respiratory system. So, if you've ever wondered why your dog seems to want to leave the room the moment you're cleaning a wound or wiping down a surface with rubbing alcohol, that reaction might not just be about disliking the smell. It might be their body correctly registering that something in the air isn't good for them. Even alcohol-based hand sanitizers, which are designed for use on skin, can be harmful if a dog ingests a significant amount. Many hand sanitizers also contain other ingredients like fragrance, which adds another layer of potential odor that your dog might find unpleasant or irritating. If you're using alcohol-based products in your home, it's wise to be mindful of your dog's presence. Ventilate the area well, don't use large amounts of these products near your dog, and keep them stored securely so your dog can't access and ingest them. This brings us to the category that deserves the most careful attention in this entire video: essential oils. Essential oils are everywhere in modern American homes, and their popularity has skyrocketed in recent years. Diffusers sit on nightstands, in living rooms, sometimes even in home offices, quietly releasing scent into the air for hours at a time. There's a very common belief that because these oils are natural, they must be safe, maybe even beneficial for the household pets, breathing them in right alongside everyone else. Tea tree oil, pennyroyal, wintergreen, clove, and yes, citrus oils are documented as toxic to dogs. Lemongrass, citronella, peppermint, and eucalyptus are frequently reported as smells dogs actively dislike, even before you get into the question of toxicity. German Shepherds specifically also tend to be prone to skin sensitivities and respiratory issues that can be triggered or worsened by environmental irritants. And a diffuser running for hours in an enclosed room is exactly that kind of environmental irritant. The problem with essential oils is multiple layers deep. First, there's the direct toxicity risk. Certain essential oils contain compounds that are genuinely poisonous to dogs, causing symptoms ranging from mild irritation to organ damage. Tea tree oil, for example, is considered one of the more dangerous essential oils for dogs, and even small amounts can cause problems if ingested or absorbed through the skin. Second, there's the respiratory irritation risk. The volatile organic compounds in essential oils can irritate the sensitive tissues of a dog's respiratory system, especially when diffused for long periods in enclosed spaces. Dogs with underlying respiratory conditions, such as those common in brachycephalic breeds, are particularly vulnerable, but even healthy dogs can experience irritation from prolonged exposure. Third, there's the behavioral risk. Some dogs find the strong smells of essential oils unpleasant, and exposure can cause stress or anxiety. A dog who's constantly exposed to a smell they find aversive might experience chronic low-level stress, which can have negative effects on their overall health and well-being. So here's where this video needs to draw a clear line, because it's the single most important piece of practical information in this entire topic. If your goal is simply, does my German Shepherd find this smell unpleasant? Essential oils are a mild concern at best. The evidence for aversion specifically is honestly weak. But if the real question is, should this be in my house at all around my dog? The evidence for toxicity is strong. Tea tree oil in particular is considered one of the more dangerous essential oils for dogs. This isn't a case where my dog didn't seem to mind it means it's fine. A dog not visibly reacting to a smell doesn't mean that smell isn't slowly irritating their respiratory system or building toward a toxic exposure if they're around it enough, or if they ever come into direct contact with the concentrated oil itself. If you take away nothing else from this video, take away this. Natural is not the same thing as safe. Many natural substances are perfectly safe and many are not. Essential oils fall into the latter category for dogs. Just because something comes from a plant doesn't mean it's harmless to have around your pets. Let's talk about two more categories quickly, because they follow a similar pattern before we get into what's actually happening underneath all of this. Strong spices, chili powder, black pepper, cayenne show up in general dog behavior reported as unpleasant, and the mechanism makes intuitive sense. These are compounds that cause a genuine burning sensation in nasal passages, which is exactly why some people use pepper-based sprays as garden deterrents against animals. Dogs exposed to these strong spices are reported to sneeze, cough, and try to physically remove themselves from the area. The capsaicin in chili peppers, for example, activates pain receptors in mammals, and dogs are no exception. When a dog inhales particles of cayenne or other hot spices, the result can be real discomfort, not just a mild dislike. Again, though no German Shepherd-specific testing exists for this category either. The reports are based on general canine behavior and observations from dog owners who've had their dogs exposed to spicy foods or spices in the kitchen. And using pepper-based irritants near a dog on purpose is something that can cause real nasal and respiratory discomfort. So this isn't really a safe household hack so much as it is a smell to be cautious around generally. It's worth noting that some dogs seem to be more sensitive to spicy smells than others, and individual variation is likely at play here as well. Some dogs will avoid the area where spices have been spilled, while others seem barely bothered by it. The genetic and experiential factors we discussed earlier are probably the primary drivers of these individual differences. And then there's mothballs, an old-fashioned household item that's still sitting in some closets and storage boxes across the country. Mothballs have a distinctive, strong smell that's instantly recognizable to anyone who's encountered them. Dogs are commonly reported to avoid the smell of mothballs, which might sound like a convenient, natural repellent until you learn why that smell exists in the first place. Mothballs contain naphthalene or paradichlorobenzene, both of which are toxic chemicals. The smell is a warning signal, produced by these volatile compounds as they slowly release into the air. If a dog avoids that smell, it might genuinely be their body doing them a favor, providing an instinctive aversion to a substance that could be harmful. But that also means mothballs should never be treated as a harmless deterrent tool. They're something to be kept away from dogs entirely, not something to lean into as a training method. If a dog does ingest a mothball, or even breathes in significant amounts of the fumes over time, the health consequences can be severe. The dangers of mothballs extend beyond just dogs. They're harmful to humans too, which is why they're typically stored in sealed containers away from living spaces. But the risk to dogs is particularly acute because dogs, being curious creatures, might investigate and even attempt to eat mothballs if they find them accessible. There's one more story worth mentioning here because it perfectly illustrates just how unpredictable canine responses to smells can be. There's a reported case of a German Shepherd named Magic who was skunked not once, but repeatedly. If there's any smell you'd assume would create an overwhelming permanent aversion in a dog, it's skunk spray. It's one of the most universally unpleasant odors most people can imagine, with a chemical composition specifically designed to be offensively pungent. And yet, Magic kept encountering the skunk again. Whatever aversion existed clearly wasn't strong enough or wasn't generalized enough to prevent repeat run-ins. Even with a smell that intense, individual behavior didn't follow the pattern you'd expect. This dog, for whatever reason, wasn't sufficiently deterred by the skunk smell to avoid future encounters. This story highlights the limitations of assuming any particular smell will reliably repel a dog. Even something as overwhelmingly unpleasant as skunk spray doesn't produce a universal avoidance response. Some dogs seem to learn from the experience, while others apparently don't. Why might this be? Perhaps the dog's motivation to investigate or chase the skunk outweighed the unpleasantness of the spray. Perhaps the dog had a less sensitive nose than other German Shepherds. Perhaps the dog simply didn't make a strong enough association between the smell and the discomfort. The exact reasons are impossible to know, but the outcome is clear. You can't rely on any smell, no matter how unpleasant it seems, to consistently keep a dog away. At this point, it's worth pausing to correct a few myths directly, because these ideas get repeated so often that people start treating them as settled fact. Clearing these misconceptions is essential for understanding how to properly manage smells around your German Shepherd. The idea that all dogs hate citrus isn't accurate. Many dogs avoid it, but plenty show no reaction at all, and some genuinely enjoy it. The truth is more nuanced and individualized than the blanket statement suggests. While there's some evidence that citrus can be aversive to some dogs, it's far from universal. And assuming your dog will react a certain way based on this generalization is unreliable. The idea that vinegar always repels dogs isn't accurate either. The evidence is mixed, with some dogs avoiding it and others completely ignoring it. The inconsistency of response patterns suggests that vinegar is not a reliable deterrent for most dogs. If it works for your dog, that's fine, but don't assume it will work for others. The idea that you can safely use strong smells to control your dog's behavior is not just inaccurate, it's actively risky, because many of the smells people reach for essential oils, mothballs, and concentrated cleaning agents carry real toxicity concerns. Using aversive odors as a form of punishment or deterrent isn't something supported by veterinary behavior professionals, and the potential for harm is significant. The idea that a dog walking away from a smell proves they hate it is also too simple. Walking away could mean disinterest, mild dislike, sensory overwhelm, or just a total lack of relevance to that dog at that moment. Interpreting behavior is complex, and attributing a specific emotional state to a simple action like walking away is often inaccurate. And maybe the biggest myth of all, the idea that anything unpleasant to a human nose must be unpleasant to a dog's nose, that's false, because dogs and humans have fundamentally different olfactory systems built around entirely different evolutionary pressures. What smells bad to us might smell interesting or neutral to a dog, and vice versa. So where does all of this leave you as a German Shepherd owner trying to figure out what to actually do? The honest, responsible answer is this. Pay attention to your specific dog, not the breed in general, your dog, your individual German Shepherd, with their unique genetics, experiences, and preferences. If you notice your German Shepherd consistently turning away, sneezing, coughing, or trying to leave the room around a particular smell, that's real information about that individual animal, and it's worth respecting. These behavioral signals are your dog's way of communicating discomfort, and they deserve to be taken seriously. But don't assume that reaction will automatically apply to every German Shepherd you ever meet. And definitely don't assume the reverse, because some article told you, dogs hate a certain smell, your dog must hate it too, even if your dog has shown zero signs of that. Your dog's behavior is the best guide, not generic breed information. When it comes to actually managing smells in your home, the priority should never be, what can I use to repel my dog, using scent alone? The priority should be safety first. That means being genuinely cautious with essential oil diffusers, keeping mothballs completely out of reach, being thoughtful about alcohol-based products, and never assuming that natural automatically means harmless. If you want to discourage your dog from a specific area or behavior, there are training-based approaches grounded in actual veterinary behavior science that don't rely on gambling with your dog's respiratory health. Positive reinforcement, management strategies, and consistent training methods are much more reliable and safer than trying to use smell as a deterrent. Here's the bigger picture worth sitting with. We started with a simple-sounding question. What smell do German Shepherds hate? And what we found is that the honest answer required unlearning a few things most people assume are true. The idea that German Shepherds have some kind of super nose that makes strong smells unbearable isn't well supported by the scientific evidence. In fact, in controlled testing, pugs actually outperformed them in odor discrimination tasks. Their success as working dogs comes from a combination of factors that includes trainability, intelligence, and drive, not just exceptional olfactory hardware. The idea that there's a shared, breed-wide list of hated smells also isn't supported by the evidence. Genetics and individual experience shape each dog's reactions in ways that vary dramatically, even within the same breed. Two German Shepherds from the same litter can have meaningfully different responses to the same smell, depending on their genetic makeup and personal history. The idea that natural remedies involving strong scents are a safe way to manage your dog's behavior is not just questionable in a lot of cases. They're actually a hidden safety risk, hiding behind a comforting word like natural. Essential oils, mothballs, and other strongly scented household products can pose real health risks to dogs, and using them as deterrents is both ineffective and potentially harmful. If you actually know your dog really pays attention to the specific things that make them uncomfortable versus the things they don't react to at all, you're working with better information than any generic list could ever give you. Your dog's behavior is the most reliable guide, and respecting their individual preferences and aversions is part of being a responsible owner. The most important takeaway from all of this is to prioritize safety over convenience or assumptions. Just because something is widely believed doesn't make it true, and just because something is natural doesn't make it safe. When in doubt, consult with your veterinarian or a veterinary behaviorist about the products and smells in your home. They can provide guidance based on current scientific knowledge and your dog's specific needs. If this got you thinking about what else might be sitting around your house that could be putting your German Shepherd at risk without you realizing it, that's actually a much bigger and more important question than the one we just answered. Because we touched on essential oils, mothballs, and alcohol-based products today, but there's a much longer list of everyday household items that seem completely harmless and are quietly dangerous to dogs. Some of them things you probably have in your kitchen or bathroom right now. That's exactly what the next video breaks down, item by item, so you know precisely what to double-check before your German Shepherd gets anywhere near it. If keeping your dog safe matters to you, that's the video to watch next. In the meantime, continue observing your dog, learning their individual preferences, and creating a safe environment that respects their unique sensory experience. Your German Shepherd's nose is an incredible gift that allows them to experience the world in ways we can barely imagine. But it's also a sensitive organ that deserves careful consideration when choosing what products to bring into your home. The more you understand about how your dog experiences smells, the better equipped you'll be to provide a comfortable, safe, and happy life for your four-legged companion.